there, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia Season 6 review. And today we're going to be talking about the latest episode to drop, episode 15, Tartarus, which follows off from the cooldown episode last week where we saw the aftermath of the huge battles in Jakku in the mountains, as well as the aftermath of Gigantomachia's Path of Destruction, before pivoting to see what happens next from both the hero and villain points of view. And so before we begin properly, I would like to say that I have read the manga and I'm aware of any relevant future plot points and details. But for the purpose of these reviews, I really prefer to look at things from an anime-only perspective, so that anime-only fans can watch along and join in too. Although, with that being said, I have forgotten things as it's been a fair while since my last read-through. But yeah, regardless, with all that being said, let's jump into the review. So we start off the episode with a look at the Tartarus maximum security prison in the day or so immediately after the battle. And through some narration from Deku, we learn that this is pretty much the Guantanamo Bay of Hero Society Japan, a maximum security offshore containment facility where those who pose a danger to Japan are sent to rot, held in 6 different levels dependent on the severity of their crimes and the strength of their quirks, with the really top level villains held in the deepest vaults to ensure that they cannot ever escape. And indeed the show tells you that it's said that when you enter the facility as a prisoner, you're never coming back out, and that ultimately this is the dark side of Quirk Society. And this to me suggests that some of these villains don't even get proper trials. They're just handed a life sentence no matter what. Which, yeah, I've got to wonder why they don't just execute some of these characters then. Like, they have capital punishment in Japan. They have it now, and apparently in this distant future they have it still. I mean, Moonfish was on death row, so I have no idea why they'd keep some of these monsters alive. Moonfish, Muscular, surely they'd be on death row. It's not like this facility's trying to rehabilitate anybody here. And speaking of which, we then get a look at All For One, who, using his mental link to Shigaraki's body, is now preparing his escape, which is when we actually cut to Shigaraki and the rest of the League of Villains. Of course, All For One's still possessing him, and he wants to use the Nomu to help him free his true body. But before we get to see all that, we have to go to the intro theme. And when we return, we're told it's 8 PM. We see 2 brother heroes standing guard at the Bronze Gate of Tartarus, and I gotta say, I realised they had a big disaster that day. But perhaps there should have been more than 2 heroes guarding the entrance to the biggest hive of villainy in Japan. You know, just a thought. Aren't there supposed to be thousands of heroes? Couldn't they spare a few more to guard this place? Anyway, the Nomus are then sensed, and the 2 heroes and the security droids open fire. But they're clearly no match for these near high-ends, as one of the brothers is almost instantly killed by a Nomu flinging spikes, and the other's killed when Shigaraki, for one, hits him with that energy attack thing. I don't know, it vaporized him. And so yeah, bad luck fellas, they're gone. And All For One even calls this battle a letdown. So even he's getting a little bit of second-hand embarrassment at how easy it is to bust into this prison. We then cut to 3 minutes before the attack in the deepest levels of the facility, where the guards are talking about how the next day, Gigantomachia is supposed to arrive, and you can imagine that if All For One had waited that extra day and managed to free the big man in the chaos alongside the rest of them, that'd be an instant game over for Hero Society. Because at that point, literally nobody is capable of stopping them, especially since all our major players are in hospital or recovering. The guards then pretty much prove the point of the villains, calling Gigantomachia and everybody else in Tartarus beasts or animals, less than human. And I guess this just creates a vicious cycle. You have the regular people who are frightened by these criminals, which in turn makes them lash out at these people who are different, which in turn marginalizes more and more people and makes them more sympathetic to the villain ideology of changing society and removing the taint of false heroes. And it's actually pretty nuanced writing if you ask me. I really enjoyed that part of the episode. And then, surprise surprise, the attack begins. All For One easily breaks through the Bronze Gate, and his Nomu begin to overwhelm the security droids sent to neutralize him. At this point, Shigaraki wakes up and starts trying to resist All For One, only to eventually get talked down. Now that he's had time to rest and he isn't in a bloodlust-fueled state, he can probably think a little bit more clearly. And he accepts that in order for him to heal properly, as his body's still falling apart after that huge battle, he'll need All For One's original body to help him do so. So Shigaraki argues that he's not going to be All For One's pawn anymore. But All For One simply tells him that he's so much more than that. He's his next self. So yeah, it kind of sounds like he's a pawn. To me, this pretty much feels like, hey, I'm basically going to mind fuse with you at some point. Have fun with that. It honestly sounds awful. I'm not sure how anybody could possibly think this is a better alternative than him just straight up stealing your body. Ugh. So yeah, All For One uses both of the bodies to bust out of the prison in sequence, knowing that it needs to be perfectly timed. You can't bust in, and you can't just bust out, you need to do them both at the same time. And even then, he still needs to release the full might of the prisoners within the facility, otherwise he's going to eventually get overwhelmed, as neither of his bodies are strong enough right now to do it alone. He even goes on to muse that even if Gigantomachia had been there, it would still be difficult, that the odds still would have been stacked in the prison's favour. And that's not what we really see at all. Here the guards just get bodied, but sure. So within the facility, he manages to knock out the power, which in turn lets the prisoners start to riot and escape, with the armed guards having little chance at all. Villains like Muscular and Moonfish start slaughtering people left and right, Stain's out, Overhaul's out, and the new villain who's in the intro fighting Deku, she's out. Honestly, this whole sequence, it is pure awesome. I just really do enjoy the All for One sequences quite a lot, and this is one of the best. Pure carnage from start to finish. And yet another massive victory for the villains. Pretty much restocks their entire army that they lost during the raids, but now with even stronger villains. And so really, next arc is going to be nuts. Anyway, the villains get out from the bunker, but since the bridge is gone, all these villains have no choice but to join with All for One if they want to escape. And once again, a really good strategy here. They pretty much have to throw their lot in with him, or they'll just get arrested instantly again. And I'm really excited to see where they go from here. I'm looking forward to some rematches soon. But then we have a little bit of a time jump, where everything's made worse as the escaped villains are sent by All for One to break into 7 more prisons alongside the high-end Nomu. And then they release even more degenerates back into the streets, all to try and distract the heroes from hunting him down, as their first priority needs to be stopping this huge influx of villains who are out in the community unleashing chaos and violence. And once again, another good plan. All for One is such a good villain. Anyway, Spinner tries to ask who the hell All for One even is, and indicates that he's in this to follow Shigaraki, not him. But All for One sort of just brushes him off, tries to reassure him, and states that once Shigaraki's rested, he's going to return better than ever. But yeah, Spinner doesn't seem convinced, and fair enough, dude's creepy and sus. I doubt this is the last we're going to hear of Spinner's discontent with what's been happening. And then we move on from the villains and take a look at the heroes, who are all stuck in hospital because, well, turns out getting impaled, breaking all your bones and cutting off your leg is hazardous to the health. I mean, who knew? Anyway, Bakugo wakes up in a panic, probably with a little bit of PTSD from the battle. Fair enough, dude's 15 and almost got killed. That's some pretty tough stuff. Hopefully UA has a therapist on staff. Anyway, some of his peers burst into the room, including Mineta, who's in tears and tries to engulf Bakugo in a huge, unwelcome hug with limited success. Bakugo then asks about all the combatants that were fighting Shigaraki, and is told that for the most part, everybody's okay. They all survived and they're awake, except for Deku, who's still unconscious, because, yeah, well, he probably pushed himself a little bit too hard. And then we get a look at Gran Torino, who honestly should have died. Bit ridiculous that he's able to survive getting a hole punched through his chest, but guess we just have to accept it. And he continues reflecting on Shimura and her sacrifice of hiding her son away and giving him up to protect him. And honestly, he's probably just mad that in the end, it all meant nothing at all. And on top of that, he probably has regrets about not breaking his word and looking for the kid himself to keep an eye out for him. We then cut to Aizawa and present Mike, where the doctor's telling them that Aizawa was going to live, much like Gran Torino, but it was touch and go, and he was close to dying. Whew, that's some pretty heavy stuff. But yeah, the more I'm sitting here, the more I feel like somebody probably should have died in that fight against Shigaraki. I know a couple of named heroes died in the arc, but they were more for shock factor. There was nobody on the level of Torino. He should have gone. Surely his story arc's gone as far as you need now. And I feel like his death would have served as a really powerful moment for Deku, even more than Sir Night-Eye's death. Just made sense to me, but oh well. And then the last chunk of the episode's dedicated to planting the seeds for the next Todoroki family group therapy session, as Shoto sees from his window that the public are very angry at his dad and pretty much are saddling him with all of the blame for everything, whilst his family, including his mum, who's now allowed to leave the hospital even after all this trauma, arrive in his room to see him, and they prepare to see Endeavour, who's still pretty banged up and is undergoing surgery. And so yeah, the preview promises some more drama. And I live for the drama, so I'm very excited for next episode. But of course, that's the end of the video, and so with all that being said, these are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? You like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know.